I stood there, heart pounding as I watched my son-in-law mock me, his words still stinging, "Feed the dog first." After all the years I'd spent raising his wife, my daughter, and supporting their family, this was the gratitude I received. But I wasn't going to let him humiliate me. Instead, I handed him the foreclosure papers, his future sealed with my resolve. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The scent of roasted chicken filled Evelyn Harper's farmhouse kitchen, buttery and golden, with thyme and rosemary clinging to the air like ghosts of a better time. Mashed potatoes, steaming, sat in a bowl beside her worn linen napkins, each one ironed flat, folded with care. She'd baked a blackberry cobbler, too, the kind Lily loved, with the sugar crackling on top and a hint of lemon zest hidden in the crust. It was Sunday. It was supposed to mean something. The table was full, too full, with Kyle's work buddies crowding the chairs like they owned the place, loud voices, the smell of cheap cologne and entitlement. Maggie fluttered between the dining room and kitchen like a nervous ghost, topping off sweet tea and passing out seconds with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, as she always had. A quiet presence. Regal in her cardigan and pearl earrings, back straight despite the weight of years and silence. Her plate, carefully assembled, just enough chicken, a small scoop of potatoes, green beans with bacon, sat untouched in front of her. Until Kyle reached across the table, curled his thick fingers under the ceramic edge, and shoved it aside with a dismissive scrape of china against wood. "Feed the dog first," he said, jerking his chin toward the floor where Sadie, Evelyn's golden retriever, waited politely near her bed. "She deserves it more." For a beat, silence. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop spinning. Then one of Kyle's friends burst out laughing, another chiming in with a guffawed, "Damn, that's cold, man." Kyle leaned back smugly, folding his arms like he'd just delivered a killer punchline on late-night television. Evelyn didn't flinch. Not a blink, not a muscle twitch. Her expression was blank in a way that suggested not confusion or hurt, but something older, more settled. She reached slowly for her water glass, took a sip, and gently set it back down with the same care she'd used when setting the table. Across the room, Lily froze mid-bite, her fork hovering near her mouth. She looked from her father to her grandmother, eyes narrowing. "That's not funny," she said quietly. Kyle waved her off. "Relax, kid. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive, just like your grandma." "Enough," Evelyn said, voice low and even. No one heard it except Clara Mason, seated at the far end of the table, one brow raised, one hand curled around a glass of iced tea that had long since watered down. She watched Evelyn the way a hawk watches a snake, patiently, but without pity. "You don't have to take this," Clara murmured, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Evelyn's eyes flicked to hers, and for the first time that evening, something passed across her face. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, more dangerous, a thought, a decision. She placed her napkin gently beside her untouched plate, folded with surgical precision. Then she pushed back her chair, not fast, not with drama, but deliberately, as though every inch of movement were being measured. Maggie looked up from where she stood near the kitchen door, hands clenched around a pitcher of tea. "Mom?" "I'm stepping out," Evelyn said, adjusting her cardigan. "Enjoy your meal." "You didn't eat," Lily whispered, but Evelyn was already walking. Kyle snorted. "Oh, come on, it was a joke. You can't seriously be—" Evelyn didn't stop. Her heels tapped softly across the hardwood floor, a slow metronome counting down to something unseen. She moved past the hallway photos, her late husband's smile, Lily as a toddler in her arms, and stepped out the front door without looking back. Outside, the sun had dipped just below the horizon. The sky was bruised with purples and amber, cicadas beginning their long, electric whine. Evelyn stood on the porch for a moment, the weight of decades behind her and the silence of a future reshaping ahead. Inside, laughter rose again, nervous, scattered, then muted by a closing door. She stepped down from the porch and crossed the yard to her detached office. It was locked, just as she'd left it. She fished out the keys from her pocket and opened the door with a steady hand. The cool air inside smelled of old books, lemon oil, and ink. She sat at her desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the fireproof folder. A tab peeked out from within. Stone, property loan agreement. Her fingers rested on it for a moment, like she was touching something alive. From inside the house, the dog barked once. Evelyn smiled faintly, barely more than a breath of movement. Then she turned on the desk lamp, pulled the file out, and began to read. The soft buzz of the desk lamp cast a warm circle across Evelyn's paperwork, the rest of the room swallowed in the kind of quiet only her detached office could offer. No footsteps, no laughter, just the slow, unrelenting tick of the old wall clock and the rustle of paper between her fingers. She slid out the loan file labeled Stone, Private Mortgage Agreement, and laid it across the desk like a dissection. Her hands were steady, her expression unreadable. Her tea, now lukewarm, sat untouched. The deed came first, clean, precise, recorded in her name, with a private note scrawled in the margin from nearly a decade ago. Maggie's security, for her peace. Evelyn stared at the handwriting for a long moment before flipping the page. Then came the payment ledger. March, missed. April, missed. May, partial. June, nothing. The pattern was familiar, that slow, creeping failure dressed up as inconvenience, like a leak under the sink you think you can ignore, until the floor caves in. She reached for a yellow legal pad, drew 2 underlines beneath the words "default initiated," and began listing the dates. The front door creaked open. "You still at it?" Clara's voice floated in before her frame followed, clutching 2 steaming mugs and a plastic grocery bag. "Brought your favorite. Cinnamon scone, the dry kind you pretend to hate." Evelyn didn't look up. "Put it on the windowsill." Clara set down the scone without comment, then slid into the worn armchair beside the desk. Her sharp eyes skimmed the open file. "How bad?" "5 months in the red," Evelyn replied, flipping to a document marked with Kyle's signature. Arrogant, slanted, too large for the line it belonged on. 6, if you count this month. Clara leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "And he hasn't said a word to Maggie?" Evelyn said nothing, just pulled another folder. Insurance records, unpaid. A receipt marked NSF in red across the top. After a beat, Clara's mouth twisted. He put his fork in the wrong plate. Evelyn's hand paused mid-page, just for a second. Then she continued organizing, pages in neat piles, binder clips sorted by size. No drama. Just focus. "I want Frank's input by Monday," she said. "If I move forward, it has to be airtight." Clara gave a low whistle. "You're really doing it." Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she opened her laptop, the screen glowing faintly in the dim room. Her inbox pinged. Frank Dalton had sent over the draft notice of default, the subject line crisp and cold. "Stone property. Delinquency action. Review attached." She opened the attachment. Everything was there. Date of mortgage, default clause, interest accrued, the 30-day response window, legally sound, emotionally hollow. Still, Evelyn began typing corrections, her fingers moving faster now. Behind her, the floor creaked. "Grandma?" Evelyn turned slightly to see Lily in the doorway, barefoot in her hoodie, hair tousled from the shower. She held a half-eaten piece of cobbler in one hand. "I knocked," Lily said. No one answered. "It's all right," Evelyn said, voice gentler than before. "Come in." Lily padded across the room, eyes darting to the papers. Her gaze locked on the header. "Notice of default. Private property lien, Knoxville County." "Are you really going to do it?" she asked quietly, thumb pressing into the crust of the cobbler slice. Evelyn looked at her granddaughter, still young, but old enough to understand that some lines once crossed don't uncross. Her voice was calm. "Actions have consequences, Lily, even for family." Lily sat down slowly in the corner chair, the one with the threadbare cushion. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't need to. Evelyn hit print. The machine stirred to life beside her, spitting out the first page with a mechanical sigh. A small storm was building, quiet, invisible, Inevitable. She reached into the drawer for her notary stamp and a fine-tip pen. Clara watched from the side, her voice low but firm. Once this leaves your hands, there's no stuffing it back in the envelope. Evelyn pressed the stamp onto the bottom of the page, sealing it with a sharp thunk of rubber and ink. She didn't look up. I know. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, far off but coming. The morning sun crept over the rooftops like it didn't know what was coming. Evelyn stood at the edge of the porch, envelope in hand, ironed blouse tucked neatly into her slacks, hair pinned back with quiet precision. The notice of default rested in her grip, not folded, not hidden, not anymore. The crisp paper fluttered once in the wind. Behind her, Clara leaned against the railing, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. You sure you don't want me to do it? Evelyn's voice was calm. Number? This one's mine. She crossed the dewy lawn slowly, each step measured like she was walking into court instead of her own daughter's front yard. The grass clung to her shoes. Her breathing stayed even. Only the tightening of her jaw betrayed the storm behind her quiet eyes. Kyle's truck sat crooked in the driveway, one tire slightly on the curb. Oil stains marked his usual spot, like footprints that never washed away. Evelyn climbed the short set of porch steps and reached for the doorframe. She centered the notice against the wood, just above the welcome sign Maggie had hung back when things still resembled normal. Then, using 2 short nails and a tack hammer, she fastened it in place. The sound of the hammer, thunk, thunk, was sharp in the morning stillness. Final. The door flew open. Kyle stood there in a pair of mesh shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, eyes puffy, breath sour with sleep and resentment. "What the hell is this?" he barked, snatching the paper from the door. Evelyn didn't move. He read it quickly, lips moving, then crumpled it in his fist. "Are you insane? You think this is going to scare me?" "It's not meant to scare you," Evelyn said, voice quiet but unshakable. "It's meant to notify you you're in default." He laughed, a dry, guttural sound. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't— Maggie won't let you." Evelyn's eyes didn't waver. 30 days isn't a bluff, Kyle. It's the law. His face twisted, rage climbing like heat under his skin. "This is my house. You gave it to us." "I lent it," she corrected. "And you signed the terms." He spun around and stormed back inside, yelling up the stairs. "Maggie! Maggie, get down here! Your mother's lost her damn mind!" Maggie appeared a moment later on the landing, barefoot, hair unbrushed, robe half-tied. Her face paled as she saw the wadded paper in Kyle's hand. He shoved it toward her. "You knew about this?" "No," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I didn't." Lily appeared just behind her mother, still in her sleep shirt, arms crossed tight over her chest. She didn't look at Kyle. She looked at Evelyn, her expression unreadable, half fear, half awe. "I've been patient," Evelyn said, her tone still even. "Too patient. But that ends today." Maggie's lip trembled. "Mom, please, can't we talk about this, privately?" "You've had 5 months to talk," Evelyn replied. "Now you have 30 days to respond. That's not personal, that's procedure." Kyle cursed under his breath and stomped up the stairs, the weight of his steps shaking the old railing. A door slammed so hard it made Lily flinch. Maggie looked down at her mother from the second-floor landing. "What are you trying to prove?" "That I'm not afraid of being hated," Evelyn said, "especially not by people who already treat me like I'm disposable." Clara lifted her phone subtly from the sidewalk, camera rolling steady. No commentary, just evidence. Maggie turned and walked slowly back up the stairs, her hand brushing against Lily's shoulder as she passed. But Lily didn't follow. She stayed there silent, watching Evelyn. And then she did something Evelyn hadn't expected. She nodded. Not big, not theatrical, just enough to say, "I see you." Evelyn let out a slow breath, then turned back toward the street. The morning was still waking up. Birds chirping over garbage cans, sprinklers ticking rhythmically down the block. Behind her, the screen door slammed shut. She didn't stop walking. "Got it all," Clara said quietly, slipping her phone into her coat pocket. "Date stamped, audio clear. If he tries to twist this, we've got the truth on file." Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her jaw had clenched again, tighter than before, not from fear, but from resolve hardening into something sharper. Clara squinted sideways at her. So what now? Evelyn reached the edge of her porch, paused, and looked out at the horizon like it owed her an explanation. Now, she said, we let the clock start ticking. The first sign of it came through the grocery store clerk. Evelyn stood at the checkout line of the local Food King, her basket light, 2 lemons, a box of black tea, and Lily's favorite shortbread cookies. Just ahead, the cashier, young, overly chatty, looked up at her, then away quickly, suddenly quiet. I saw your son-in-law last night, he said finally, scanning the box of cookies without meeting her eyes. He said you've been forgettin' stuff, that you aren't, well. Evelyn didn't blink. She waited, expression smooth as ever, until the total popped up on the screen. She slid her card into the reader and said only, I remember enough to know these cookies don't scan at full price. The kid blushed and fumbled for the manager's override. By the time she reached her car, 3 more people had stared at her like they were trying to place a rumor on a real face, like a whisper with shoes. Clara called later that evening. I just got out of a hair appointment. Cheryl at the salon says Kyle told her you're slipping, that you're trying to steal the house back before the dementia sets in. Evelyn set down her teacup with a controlled clink. He's calling you vindictive, Clara continued. Says you're out for revenge because you've got nothing else to live for. Evelyn stared through her front window, eyes narrowed at the slow roll of a jogger passing by with earbuds in. Well, she said quietly, let's give him something accurate to say. The next morning, she made an appointment with Dr. Howard, the same GP she'd had for 17 years. The walls of his office hadn't changed since the Bush administration. He still offered hard mints no one took and kept dog-eared copies of Field and Stream in the waiting room. Evelyn, he said, flipping through her chart, you're healthier than most of my patients 20 years younger. What's this about? I need it in writing, she said. Mental clarity. Cognitive capacity, no signs of dementia or impairment, signed, dated, and sealed. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Family drama? Legal drama, she replied. But yes, family adjacent. He nodded, scribbled a note, and reached for the printer. You've got it. By Friday, Clara had set up shop at Evelyn's dining table, files spread out between 2 mugs of reheated coffee. She was flipping through notarized neighbor affidavits like a Vegas card dealer, each one confirming Evelyn's mental acuity, daily routines, and spotless reputation. Got one from Mrs. Talbot next door, said you caught her gas leak last spring before the fire department did, and here, Mr. Irwin from 3 blocks over says you still beat him at crossword races. I don't race, Evelyn said flatly. He rushes, I finish. Clara grinned. Point stands. These are good. They'll hold up. At noon, Frank Dalton pulled into the driveway. He arrived the way he always did. Gray suit, black leather briefcase, no small talk. He stepped inside, reviewed the packet of affidavits, glanced at Evelyn's medical clearance, and nodded once. I'm filing the motion Monday. Request to proceed with foreclosure. Everything's in order. Evelyn signed the last form, sliding it across the table with a steady hand. Frank packed up and left without pleasantries, just a firm handshake and a parting. We'll win this clean. Clara watched him go. That man's got all the warmth of a fax machine. Evelyn stood, walking to the window. Outside, Kyle's truck was gone again, likely parked somewhere in town while he fed his poison to someone new. She imagined the conversations. Poor Maggie. Can you believe her mother turned on her like that? Old folks get bitter, you know. Sometimes they just snap. Let them talk. She turned back to Clara. They've mistaken kindness for weakness. Clara raised her eyebrows. And what do they get for that mistake? Evelyn reached over, pulled a binder from the cabinet, and opened it to a fresh tab labeled Hearing Prep. An education, she said. As she flipped through the pages, her phone buzzed once on the table. It was a message from Maggie. Just one line. I don't know what to believe anymore. Evelyn stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered, then retreated. No reply. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper, pine-scented floor polish, and anxiety. It was the smaller civil chamber in downtown Knoxville, modest, square, fluorescent lights humming overhead. There were no jurors, no cameras, no dramatic gavel slams, just the clack of clerks, the low drone of attorneys conferring, and the looming authority of a single man in robes. Judge Harold Reynolds sat at the bench like he'd been poured into it, 63, no nonsense, and constitutionally unimpressed by theatrics. A gold wedding band gleamed on his hand every time he flipped a page. Evelyn Harper sat at the plaintiff's table in a dark navy blazer, hair pinned tight, not a wrinkle out of place. Her face gave nothing away. Kyle slouched across the aisle at the defense table beside his court-appointed attorney, a twitchy man who looked like he hadn't slept since undergrad. Kyle wore a cheap suit with the sleeves too long, and the confidence of a man who still thought this was all just a misunderstanding. Maggie sat in the gallery, alone. Not beside her husband, not beside her mother. Her hands were folded in her lap, white-knuckled, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere between the flag and the exit sign. Lily wasn't present. Evelyn hadn't let her come. "All parties present?" Judge Reynolds asked without looking up. Frank Dalton rose. "Plaintiff present and prepared, Your Honor." "Defense?" The court-appointed attorney gave a half-stand. "Yes, Your Honor. Defense is ready." "Let's begin." Frank started methodically, laying out the loan structure Evelyn had extended to Maggie and Kyle, an arm's-length agreement, properly notarized, with clear repayment terms and maturity dates. He passed the documents to the bailiff, who brought them to the judge's bench. Reynolds flipped through the pages without expression. Then Kyle stood. "She promised us the house," he said, his voice rising. "Free and clear. It wasn't a loan. It was a gift." Frank didn't look up. "Please direct responses to the bench, Mr. Stone." Kyle spread his arms like a preacher trying to conjure sympathy. "We moved in because she said it was for family, that it was Maggie's security. We wouldn't have taken it otherwise." Evelyn didn't blink. Her hands were clasped in her lap. Judge Reynolds looked up. "Mr. Stone, you're asserting this was a verbal gift with no written condition?" "Yes, sir." Frank rose again. "Your Honor, I'd like to direct your attention to the signed mortgage agreement on page 3. It includes scheduled payment terms, a lien clause, and a default remedy, signed by both Mr. and Mrs. Stone, notarized by a third party." Kyle's face twitched. "It's just paper. She didn't mean it." Judge Reynolds lifted the document. "Did you or did you not sign this?" "I signed what she put in front of me. I didn't read every word." "That," the judge said, "is not a defense. Continue." Frank motioned for Evelyn. She stood slowly, approached the witness stand, and swore in with a calm nod. He walked her through the basics, how the loan was structured, why it was done privately, how she had deferred collecting until the arrears grew unsustainable. "Did you ever offer the home as a gift?" "No," Evelyn said evenly. "And why not?" She met the judge's eyes. "Because it wasn't a gift. It was a hand-up. What I received in return was contempt." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Maggie flinched but kept her eyes lowered. "Let the record reflect," Frank added, "that the plaintiff has consistently upheld her legal responsibilities and acted with restraint despite multiple delinquencies." Judge Reynolds nodded once, marking something on his pad. Frank adjusted his tie. "And now, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to introduce supplemental documentation pertaining to a second lien placed on the property, without her knowledge, and apparently without Mrs. Stone's either." Kyle's head snapped up. "What?" Maggie looked confused. "What is he talking about?" Frank turned. "Mr. Stone, did you or did you not take out a secondary loan against the property 6 months ago through Capital River Lending?" Kyle's mouth opened, then closed. "That wasn't—" Frank handed a packet to the bailiff. Documented, filed with the county, forged Evelyn Harper's initials on the authorization page. The room dropped into dead silence. Maggie's face drained of color. "You forged her name?" Kyle sputtered. "It was just paperwork. It wasn't—" "Did you tell your wife?" No answer. Judge Reynolds leaned back slowly in his chair, hands folded. "Mr. Dalton, will you be filing a separate fraud motion?" Frank nodded. "It's being prepared now." Maggie stood abruptly, one hand over her mouth. She didn't speak, just turned and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Evelyn's eyes followed her but didn't chase her. Judge Reynolds tapped his pen against the desk once, twice. "This hearing will resume Monday at 10 a.m. I'll allow the arrears evidence and consider the lien documents admissible under the fraud exception." He banged his gavel, not loud, but final. Kyle remained standing, staring at the floor. Evelyn didn't look at him. She rose, gathered her papers, and turned to Frank. "We're not done," she said, voice low. Frank nodded. "Not even close." The courthouse hallway smelled of old linoleum and coffee burned into the carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like flies, and the air carried the thick tension of unfinished battles. Evelyn stood near the water fountain, flipping silently through a copy of the lien documents Frank had handed her. She didn't need to read them again, but it kept her hands busy. The forged initials stared back at her in Kyle's unmistakable scrawl, too wide, too rushed, too arrogant to mimic hers convincingly. The door to the ladies' room creaked open. Maggie stepped out slowly, her eyes rimmed with red, cheeks blotched with something halfway between rage and disbelief. She stopped when she saw Evelyn, uncertain, defensive, cracked open in ways she hadn't planned to be today. "He forged it," Maggie said. Her voice barely made it above a whisper. Evelyn closed the folder. "Yes." Maggie wrapped her arms tightly around herself. "He said it was just paperwork. He said we were consolidating." "You didn't sign anything?" "No." Her voice cracked. "He told me he was refinancing to get ahead. Said you wouldn't help us anymore, so he had to do something." Evelyn studied her daughter's face, the shame swimming just beneath the skin. "I thought I was protecting Lily," Maggie continued. "I thought I was keeping things calm." "That's not calm," Evelyn said gently. "That's drowning with your eyes closed." The courtroom door swung open again. Kyle barreled out, his lawyer trailing behind him like a man trying to leash a wildfire. "You don't get to pin this on me," Kyle hissed, his voice louder than it should have been in a government building. "You never supported me. You always hated that I didn't bow to her." Maggie flinched. "Kyle!" "You're letting her turn you against me," he shouted, finger jabbing toward Evelyn like she was a virus in human form. "This is what she wanted. She's been waiting to do this since we moved in." Judge Reynolds' voice cut in from the courtroom doorway. "Mr. Stone." Kyle spun around. "I'll remind you this courthouse is not your stage," the judge said coolly. "If you raise your voice again outside the courtroom, I'll hold you in contempt inside it. Do I make myself clear?" Kyle swallowed hard. His posture shrank a full 2 inches. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked past him, briefly locking eyes with Evelyn, then disappeared back inside. Kyle turned on Maggie. "You believe them over me? Over your husband?" Maggie didn't answer. She just took a step back. "You're seriously going to stand with her?" Kyle spat. "I'm not standing with anyone," Maggie said, her voice brittle. "I'm just done standing behind you." He scoffed and stormed down the hall. His lawyer chased after him, murmuring warnings Evelyn didn't care to decipher. A long pause settled between mother and daughter. "I didn't know," Maggie whispered again. "I believe you," Evelyn said softly. Maggie looked up, startled by the gentleness. "But that doesn't mean there won't be consequences," Evelyn added, just as gently. "For both of you." From around the corner, Clara approached slowly, legal pad tucked under one arm and a lukewarm coffee in her hand. She stopped beside Evelyn and surveyed Maggie with her usual lawyerly squint. "Well," Clara said dryly, "he didn't just spit on your plate. He ate your house, too." Maggie gave a short, hollow laugh, half choke, half acceptance. Evelyn exhaled, long and slow. "Come on," she said to Clara, "let's file it." "Fraud complaint?" Clara asked, flipping open the legal pad. "Every page of it." Back inside the clerk's office, the overhead lights hummed, and the copier sputtered through thick legal forms. As Evelyn signed the affidavit at the counter, Maggie lingered in the hallway, watching but not approaching. Evelyn didn't look back. Clara, standing beside her, tapped a pen against the form. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" I was ready the moment he reached across my dinner table and shoved me aside like trash. Outside, rain began to streak the courthouse windows in thin diagonal lines, smearing the view of the world beyond. Inside, Evelyn passed the notarized document to the clerk. Let's teach him what real signatures look like. Court reconvened under the low hum of institutional lighting and the stale, recycled air of legal bureaucracy. The docket moved faster now, momentum gathering like a storm front. Evelyn sat with her hands folded on the table, gaze fixed ahead. No emotion, no fidgeting, just gravity. Kyle, across the aisle, looked worse. His suit more wrinkled, his eyes more bloodshot, jaw locked in a stubborn, twitchy rhythm. His lawyer had resorted to soft whispers and occasional glances to the ceiling, like praying for a miracle. Maggie entered the courtroom last, alone again. She didn't sit in the gallery this time. She hovered by the door, arms crossed, like she didn't know where she belonged. She looked thinner, smaller, as if disbelief had started hollowing her from the inside out. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses, reviewing the fresh file before him. Next item of business, he said, tapping the folder. Allegation of fraudulent business representations involving Ms. Harper's alleged financial backing of Stone Horizon Ventures. Kyle's lawyer rose, clearing his throat. Your Honor, the defense intends to demonstrate that Ms. Harper's name and reputation were used with her knowledge to support Mr. Stone's prior startup venture. Her implication in that business relationship may affect her motive and credibility in these proceedings. Frank stood calmly. We welcome that examination, Your Honor. Judge Reynolds nodded. Proceed. From the back row, a man in a navy sport coat stepped forward. Late 40s, sharp goatee, and the slick charm of someone used to cutting corners just wide enough to stay out of jail. Your name? Judge Reynolds asked. Jeremy Cole, the man replied, Kyle's former business partner. And your statement? Cole laced his fingers together. Your Honor, I was under the impression Ms. Harper had agreed to co-sign funding guarantees when Kyle and I launched Stone Horizon. Her name was listed on the pitch deck, and I saw her signature on a preliminary backing letter. That's why I put my own money in. Frank rose slowly. And can you produce that letter? Cole nodded and handed it to the bailiff. The judge reviewed it, eyes narrowing. Ms. Harper, is this your signature? Evelyn didn't even need to see the paper. No, she said. I've never seen that document. Frank stepped forward. Your Honor, we anticipated this. With the court's permission, we've brought in an independent handwriting analyst to review both this document and the forged lien authorization introduced previously. Judge Reynolds motioned. Let's hear it. An older woman stepped up. Gray bob, glasses on a chain, calm as a surgeon. She carried 2 enlarged exhibits under her arm. After comparison, she began, displaying the blown-up signatures, it is my professional opinion that the same individual forged both Evelyn Harper's signature on the business document and the lien authorization. They show identical pressure points, inconsistent slant, and hesitation marks consistent with forgery under observation. Kyle's face turned crimson. His jaw opened, then snapped shut. Maggie, still by the door, let out a quiet breath that sounded like it had been living in her chest for years. Frank turned to Judge Reynolds. With this expert testimony, Your Honor, we request full consolidation of all matters, property default, lien fraud, and now business misrepresentation under forged financial documents. One case, one ruling. The judge gave a slow, heavy nod. Request granted. At that moment, the courtroom door creaked open behind Maggie. Lily stepped inside. She stood still for a moment, her school backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her grandmother. Then, without a word, she walked down the aisle, past her mother, and slid into the empty seat beside Evelyn. She wrapped her arms around her. Evelyn stiffened for a moment, then allowed the gesture, her hand resting lightly on Lily's arm. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Reynolds tapped his pen against the desk again. We resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest the defense prepare accordingly. The weight of evidence is growing. The gavel fell. Court dismissed. As people rustled to their feet and papers shuffled around her, Maggie stood frozen by the wall. Her daughter had walked right past her. Her husband had forged her life. Her mother was now the only one who hadn't lied. She backed out of the room slowly, one step at a time, eyes locked on Evelyn. Evelyn met the gaze, not with triumph, but with quiet certainty. Kyle's life was unraveling, and Maggie's illusions were coming apart with it. It arrived in the mailbox like any other envelope, unmarked, no return address, standard white. The only thing unusual was the way it sat slightly crooked inside the metal slot, like it had been shoved in with more emotion than care. Evelyn opened it at the kitchen table, the scent of fresh coffee still rising from her mug. There were no stamps, no postmark. Someone had hand-delivered it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Block letters, cut from magazine headlines and glued in uneven lines. "You think you've won. Watch your back." She stared at it for a full minute before setting it down beside her coffee. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the branches of the maple tree out front. Evelyn rose, locked the front door, and drew the curtains with slow, quiet precision. An hour later, Clara sat at the dining table, her reading glasses perched low, phone in hand. "This isn't just petty now," she said, squinting at the note. "This is criminal. This is a threat." Evelyn nodded once, but didn't touch the paper again. "I'll call the station," Clara said, already dialing. "You're filing a report. End of discussion." A patrol officer arrived just after noon. Officer Morales, clean-cut, steady-eyed, and appropriately skeptical until he saw the note for himself. He flipped it over with gloved hands, placed it inside a clear evidence pouch, and asked the first question Evelyn expected. "Anyone have a reason to want to intimidate you?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She just nodded toward a manila folder on the counter, court filings, notarized statements, and copies of the forged documents. Morales thumbed through the paperwork, his eyebrows slowly climbing. He exhaled. "Kyle Stone, that's your son-in-law?" "He was," Evelyn said flatly. "Was he ever physically violent with you?" "Number, but when he loses control," she said, "he flails." The officer wrote in his pad, head tilted thoughtfully. "We'll run this for prints, but just between us, this kind of thing usually comes from desperation. You've pushed someone into a corner." Evelyn sipped her coffee. "That's where rats bite, isn't it?" Morales gave her a look that landed somewhere between respect and caution. "I'll flag the case. Keep the doors locked. Install cameras if you haven't already." "We have them," Clara said. "2, front and back." "Good. I'll log this. If anything else shows up, call me directly." He handed over his card and left without ceremony. The house fell quiet. Evelyn stared out the window again, the edges of the note still etched in her mind. It wasn't the message that disturbed her. It was how casual it had been. No screaming, no confrontation, just a quiet, calculated whisper left like a seed. "I can't believe he'd do something this sloppy," Clara muttered. "Or maybe I can. Guess the mask slips when the noose tightens." Evelyn didn't answer. She rubbed the rim of her mug with her thumb, absently, her posture still composed. But Clara saw it. The slight tension in the jaw, the shift in her eyes. "You're shaken," Clara said. Evelyn blinked once, slow. "I'm aware of the stakes now. That's not the same thing as being afraid. It's close." Evelyn turned toward her, her voice low. "I've spent too many years surviving men who throw things when they're scared. A paper note doesn't rattle me, but it makes me alert." From the hallway, soft footsteps. Lily entered, hoodie zipped up to her chin, eyes already scanning the energy in the room like she could feel the mood before hearing a word. "What happened?" she asked. Clara opened her mouth, but Evelyn answered first. "Nothing for you to worry about." Lily's expression didn't change. She walked up to the table, saw the empty evidence pouch. She looked at Evelyn dead on. "Don't let him win." Evelyn's breath caught just for a moment. Not fear, something deeper, something close to protectiveness laced with steel. She reached over and touched Lily's hand. "He already lost. He just doesn't know it." The clock ticked on the wall. Clara tapped her phone screen again and looked up. "Frank's filing for a protective order. Judge Reynolds won't be lenient now. We use this. Let him hang himself." Outside, a car slowed in front of the house, just for a second, then kept driving. All three of them turned toward the window. Clara rose, slowly. Evelyn stood too. Lily didn't move, her eyes on the door now, waiting. The war was no longer just legal. It was personal. The courtroom was colder than usual, the kind of chill that settled in not from weather, but from the air around high-stakes decisions. Kyle was already at the defense table, pacing. His tie sat loose around his neck, collar open, eyes bloodshot with something between fury and panic. His court-appointed attorney looked exhausted, flipping through a binder like he was searching for salvation in someone else's mess. Evelyn sat motionless beside Frank, spine straight, face impassive. She wore a charcoal blazer today, silver brooch at the collar. Her stillness unnerved more than any outburst could have. Maggie entered last. Not with Kyle, not with Evelyn, just alone. Her makeup was minimal. Her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look older, or maybe it was the truth that had done that, aging her from the inside out. Judge Reynolds took the bench. The matter of Harper versus Stone. Final hearing. The clerk called the case. Before the judge could finish reviewing his notes, Kyle stood and launched into a tirade. Your Honor, this is a farce. She's weaponizing paperwork because she doesn't like me. That's it. This whole foreclosure is personal. She told Maggie this house was a gift. Judge Reynolds didn't look up. Kyle continued, voice rising. You don't understand what it's been like living under her thumb. She has controlled every part of our lives. She's twisting facts to destroy my reputation. Mr. Stone, Judge Reynolds said without looking up, sit down. Kyle ignored it. She's vindictive. She's dragging my name through court to punish me for not being her little lapdog. Mr. Stone, Reynolds snapped, finally lifting his eyes. This is your final warning. If you speak out of turn again, I'll remove you and continue the hearing without your testimony. Kyle stared at him, chest heaving. Then, slowly, he sat. Frank stood calmly. Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to enter into record the full payment history of the mortgage agreement, proof of ongoing arrears, the second lien filed without authorization, and certified handwriting analysis confirming forgery. He handed a thick folder to the bailiff. Judge Reynolds opened it, flipping through page after page. Frank turned to Evelyn. Ms. Harper, can you confirm the dates the defendant failed to pay? Evelyn stood, walked to the witness stand, and placed one hand on the Bible without hesitation. I can, she said. Frank stepped aside, letting her speak directly. In February, they were late by 17 days. In March, no payment. In April, partial. May and June, nothing. July, I filed the default notice. Her voice never wavered. The forged lien appeared in late August. My signature was falsified. I discovered it during the pre-foreclosure review. Was this lien authorized? No. And were you ever an investor or guarantor in Mr. Stone's company? No. Frank turned back to the judge. Let the record show that at no point did Ms. Harper deviate from legal procedure or act outside her rights as lender and lien holder. Reynolds made a note, then looked toward the gallery. Any other testimony? Maggie stood from her seat, slowly. Her voice barely carried at first. My husband lied, she said, eyes on the floor. He told me the house was ours. He told me the paperwork was just formality. I never saw a real mortgage until months later. Kyle's head snapped toward her. Maggie! She didn't flinch. I believed him. I let myself believe him, and I let him twist the truth until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. But this is real. The room held still. Then Lily rose from her seat beside Clara and walked calmly to the front. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Lily Stone, she said, voice firm. I know I'm not part of the legal side, but I was there. Reynolds gestured. Go ahead. She looked at Kyle, then at the judge. There was a dinner a few weeks ago. My grandma cooked. She pointed at Kyle, shoved her plate out of the way and said, Feed the dog first. She deserves it more. A gasp broke in the gallery. Even the stenographer's keys hesitated. Reynolds's eyes darkened. Is that true? Evelyn didn't respond. Frank did. It's not relevant to the mortgage, but it speaks to motive, hostility, and pattern of behavior. The judge leaned back, breathing out through his nose. His pen tapped once, twice, then stopped. He looked at Kyle. Mr. Stone, he said, voice granite hard, this court finds not only in favor of foreclosure, but also refers your case to the district attorney's office for formal investigation of mortgage fraud, document forgery, and intentional misrepresentation of financial instruments. Kyle's mouth opened. Wait, what? You can't. The gavel fell. One more word, Reynolds said coldly, and you'll be in holding by nightfall. Kyle slumped in his chair like the air had been knocked out of him. Frank turned to Evelyn, calm as ever. You were right to stay the course. Evelyn didn't smile. She just looked at Maggie, who stood frozen, and then at Lily, who stepped back beside her and took her hand again. Outside the courthouse, sirens began to wail in the distance. Inside, a man with too many lies had just been handed his first truth. The moving van idled at the end of the driveway, engine coughing in the late morning heat. A sheriff's cruiser was parked behind it, lights off, doors open. The air buzzed with cicadas and tension. Evelyn stood at the edge of her lawn, hands folded gently in front of her, as Sheriff Wallace read the order aloud in a voice meant to be calm but firm. The official seal at the top of the page glinted faintly in the sun. Pursuant to Judge Reynolds's ruling, dated and filed, he said, glancing briefly toward Kyle, the property is hereby returned to the legal owner, Evelyn Harper. Kyle didn't move at first. He stood on the porch like a statue about to crack in half, shirt untucked, hair unwashed, rage curling off him like steam from asphalt. "You're throwing your own family onto the street?" he finally barked, his voice raw. "You're really going through with this?" Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't blink. "This is my house," he shouted. "I lived here. I bled here. We built our life in these walls." Maggie was sitting on the stoop behind him, face buried in her hands. She hadn't spoken since the cruiser arrived, just rocked gently back and forth as if the motion alone could keep her from falling apart. Lily stood beside Evelyn, silent. She held a canvas tote with a few of her grandmother's legal files inside, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Clara, standing just behind them, raised her phone and began documenting the scene, one photo at a time. Nothing sensational, just facts. Time-stamped truth. "Sir," the sheriff said, leveling his gaze at Kyle, "you were given 72 hours' notice. That window has passed. If you do not remove yourself from the premises voluntarily, I will escort you and your belongings off the property by force." Kyle's chest rose and fell in short bursts. He looked like he wanted to explode, his hands clenched at his sides, jaw ticking. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You think some court paper and a badge means you win?" Still, Evelyn didn't speak. Kyle spat on the porch steps and stormed inside, slamming the screen door behind him. The sheriff sighed and looked over at Evelyn. "We'll give him 15 minutes. Then we start moving boxes." Evelyn nodded once, slow. Maggie lifted her head, eyes rimmed red. "Is there really no other way?" she whispered. Evelyn's voice was soft. "This is the other way." A few minutes passed. Then the door creaked open again, and Kyle emerged with a duffel bag over one shoulder, followed by two deputies carrying boxes, photo albums, kitchenware, a laptop missing its charger cord. One of them gently set a cardboard box labeled Lily Art on the edge of the curb. Kyle refused to make eye contact. He stood near the mailbox, arms crossed, glaring at the grass like it owed him something. Maggie followed with nothing but her purse, her expression emptied out, like her soul had been boxed up and left behind with the furniture. Clara lowered her phone. The sheriff walked up to the door and taped the printed order to the glass. Bold black letters across the top. Possession returned to owner. Court order, do not remove. It flapped slightly in the breeze. Evelyn stepped forward then, slowly, one foot after the other. She paused at the bottom of the steps. Kyle looked up. "You don't deserve this," he growled. "No," Evelyn said softly. "I deserve peace. You made sure I couldn't have that while you lived here." "You ruined your own family," he spat. Evelyn tilted her head. "Number I pulled it out of the fire." He laughed, dry and bitter. "You'll die alone." Evelyn blinked, unbothered. "I've done worse things alone." Lily took her hand. Clara raised the camera one last time and clicked. Sheriff Wallace nodded. "You're good to go." Evelyn ascended the porch. The screen door creaked open. She stepped inside her house. The air smelled faintly of her own lavender oil, still lingering from a life interrupted. Behind her, Kyle kicked a box across the driveway. A neighbor's curtain twitched. Evelyn didn't look back. She walked into the living room and stood in the middle of the floor, absorbing the silence. It wasn't peaceful yet, but it was hers again. And outside, the order on the door fluttered in the wind like a flag planted in reclaimed land. The silence inside the house wasn't the kind that soothed. It rang in Evelyn's ears like the echo of a bell struck long ago. The furniture indentation still ghosted across the carpet. A faint rectangular outline on the wall marked where the family portrait used to hang. The couch was gone, the clutter cleared, but the heaviness remained, for now. Evelyn walked through each room slowly, fingertips grazing doorframes and baseboards, as if reacquainting herself with a house that had aged behind her back. The living room smelled like dust and citrus cleaner. The walls were a dull beige that once felt warm. Now they just looked tired. She paused at the corner where Lily had spilled red punch 3 years ago, Kyle had yelled, Maggie had rushed to scrub, and Evelyn had said nothing. She could still see the faint stain, even now. She kept walking. In the upstairs hallway, the afternoon sun streamed through the curtains just right, catching flecks of dust in golden streaks. Evelyn opened the first door on the left, the spare bedroom Kyle had claimed as his office. It was empty now, save for a few thumbtacks still clinging to the corkboard. On the windowsill sat a penny, face up. She left it there. Downstairs, Lily had pulled on an old t-shirt and jeans and was already peeling painter's tape across the trim. A drop cloth was spread over the hardwood, and a gallon of soft sage green sat open nearby. She looked up as Evelyn entered, a smudge of primer across her cheek. "You sure you don't want to keep the beige?" Lily teased, dipping her roller. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I've had enough beige to last a lifetime." They worked in silence for a while. The rhythm of it was oddly comforting. Scrape, roll, breathe. Evelyn tackled the baseboards with a fine brush, steady hands tracing clean lines. Lily took the high strokes with her long arms, stepping back every few minutes to judge her work like a young artist eyeing a canvas. Midway through the second wall, Clara arrived with a tray of mismatched glasses and a sweating pitcher of lemonade. "Brought supplies," she said, setting them on the counter like a proud waitress in an empty diner. Crisp, tart, and fully judgment-free. She handed Evelyn a glass, then clinked her own against it. To reclaiming space, one coat at a time. They all sat on the floor in the middle of the empty room, sipping quietly, looking around like archaeologists rediscovering a buried civilization. "Strange," Evelyn said softly. "What is?" Clara asked. "How the same walls can feel completely different when the noise is gone." Clara nodded. "Different? Or finally honest?" Evelyn didn't answer. Her phone buzzed on the countertop. She stood, wiped her hands on a rag, and walked over. The message was short. "Maggie, I need time to think." Evelyn stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered. The room behind her was quiet. Then she typed, "Take all the time you need, but not at my expense." She hit send, set the phone face down, and turned back toward the room. Lily had started painting again. The wall was half green now, brighter than expected, a color that didn't apologize for taking up space. Clara leaned back, eyes closed. This house needed air. It was choking. Evelyn nodded, watching Lily move. "You going to keep it?" Clara asked. "Or rent it again?" "I don't know yet," Evelyn said, "but for the first time in a long while, I'm deciding for me." She picked up the roller again. The brush moved clean across the wall, burying the old stain beneath a single new layer of color. Outside, the wind shifted. The house, for the first time in years, started to breathe. It was nearly dusk when Evelyn sat down at the old roll-top desk in her office, the one she used to grade essays at, long before retirement and betrayal redefined her days. The window behind her glowed with the last soft orange streaks of daylight, and a fresh stack of manila folders sat squarely in front of her. She opened the top one. Harper V. Stone was over. Now came Harper V. What's Left Behind? She flipped through a copy of the original loan terms on the duplex. Her handwriting filled the margins, meticulous notes from 3 years ago, when Kyle had begged her to finance the down payment in exchange for rental income. She'd agreed under one condition: her lien would remain senior to any additional debts. Frank had double-checked the paperwork earlier that afternoon. The liens still held. Her name was etched deep in the contract, unshakable, enforceable. Evelyn traced her signature at the bottom of the page with one steady finger. Clara walked in with a file of her own and a half-empty mug of coffee. "Well?" she asked, setting the papers down beside Evelyn. "What's the verdict?" "He tried to refinance the duplex too," Evelyn said. "Another private loan, but my lien trumps it. Every dollar." Clara gave a slow whistle, then grinned like a fox. "So he built his house of cards on your property." Evelyn looked up. "And now I get to topple it." Clara sat, sipped her coffee. "Foreclosing the duplex, too? That's a statement." "It's not a statement," Evelyn said. "It's a clean break." Across the room, Lily was curled in the reading chair with a sketchpad balanced on her knees. She looked up. "What happens to it after?" she asked. "The duplex?" "Yeah." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "Haven't decided. I'll probably auction it unless I come up with a better plan." Lily's pencil moved again, the soft scrape of graphite filling the silence. Clara noticed. "What are you working on, kid?" Lily turned the sketchpad around. 2 panels, side by side. On the left, the duplex as it stood, weathered siding, overgrown lawn, sagging porch. On the right, a reimagined version, fresh paint, window boxes with flowers, a small front patio shaded by a new awning. "I was thinking," Lily said shyly, "it's 2 units, right? You could rent one, use the other as an art studio, or a guest space, or something community-based." Evelyn walked over and took the sketchpad gently from her hands. She stared at it for a long time. The duplex hadn't been anything more than a thorn in her ledger for years, but here, on thick, cream paper, it had potential again. Rebirth, function, joy. "We'd have to tear out the rotted kitchen floor," Evelyn said softly. "I already drew in a new one," Lily replied, pointing. "But maybe tile instead of laminate." Clara chuckled. "Look at this little HGTV over here." Evelyn nodded slowly, then looked back at the original contract, Kyle's name scrawled beside Maggie's, already severed from meaning. Then she reached for her pen. "I'll need Frank to file the foreclosure first thing Monday," she said. "We'll move on the auction within 60 days. Clara looked at her. "You're really going to take back everything?" "No," Evelyn replied. "Just what's mine." She closed the folder. Lily grinned. "Can I be in charge of color swatches?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're hired." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. Outside, the wind was stirring again, not restless this time, but clearing. Clara stood, stretching. "I'll go draft the notices tonight." As she reached the door, she turned back. "Evelyn, you realize what this means, right?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "It means you didn't just clean up a mess, you're building something new from it." Evelyn looked at the sketchpad one more time, then to Lily. "We'll make something better out of this mess," she said. And for the first time since it all began, she actually believed it. The county courthouse was quiet that morning. No drama, no shouting, no courtroom stares. Just the soft scratch of pens on forms and the occasional printer stuttering to life. Evelyn Harper sat at the back of the auction room in a slate-gray coat, hands folded neatly around a numbered paddle. Clara sat beside her, flipping through a folded copy of the bid packet. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. When the duplex finally came up, Evelyn raised the paddle without hesitation. There was only one other bidder, but they dropped out after the opening round. Within minutes, the gavel struck wood. "Sold," the auctioneer announced. "Property transferred to Harper Living Trust." Evelyn exhaled, quiet and long. "It's yours," Clara murmured, sliding the papers back into her bag. "Again." "Not mine," Evelyn replied, rising from her seat. "Ours." The next morning, she sat with Frank Dalton at his office desk, the deed freshly printed and unsigned before her. The trust documents were already prepared. "I'm filing it under the Harper Irrevocable Trust," Frank confirmed, tapping the top sheet. "No reversions, no contestation. You're the current trustee. Lily is successor." Evelyn took the pen without hesitation and signed the papers with a firm hand. Kyle and Maggie's names were nowhere to be seen. Frank nodded. "Clean title, no loose threads." Clara, seated in the corner, smiled behind her mug. You did it. You sealed the door. Evelyn leaned back slightly. Now, no one else gets to walk through it. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Clara opened it, but Evelyn was already on her feet, recognizing the shape through the glass. Maggie stood on the porch, not with demands, not with excuses, just with damp eyes and trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she said. Evelyn didn't speak right away. "I let him speak for both of us," Maggie continued. "I let him drown us. I let him drown me, and I don't expect you to forgive that. I need to see Lily." Evelyn stepped forward, but didn't open the screen door. "You'll see her," she said, "but only here. Supervised. You want to rebuild anything. You start with the truth, not the child." Maggie's shoulders caved in, but she nodded. "Okay, I'll take what I can get." The silence that followed was more sad than tense. When Maggie left, Clara closed the door behind her and muttered, "You're softer than she deserves." Evelyn shook her head. I'm just not harder than I need to be." Kyle, meanwhile, was behind bars. Fraud, forgery, felony misrepresentation. The case was set for trial in 6 weeks. His name appeared once in the newspaper, a column buried near the bottom of page 5. No headlines, no sympathy. Clara folded the paper and tossed it into the recycling. "That's how you feed dogs who bite," she said. "Through iron bars." Evelyn didn't argue. She simply walked back to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a slim binder with a green cover. She handed it to Clara. "What's this?" "Lily's scholarship fund," Evelyn said. "I set it up through the duplex trust. Half of every rental dollar goes into it starting next quarter." Clara blinked, surprised. "You already did this?" Evelyn nodded once. "Before the paint dried?" Lily came down the stairs just then, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones dangling from her hoodie. "You ready?" Evelyn asked. Lily nodded. "Is it weird that I like school now?" "Not weird," Evelyn said. "Just rare." She handed Lily a travel mug and her sketch pad. "Car's warm." Lily grinned and disappeared out the front door. Clara shook her head, smiling. "You really did it. You turned the whole story around." "No," Evelyn said quietly, watching her granddaughter through the window. "I just rewrote the ending." Outside, the winter wind curled against the windows, soft but sure. Inside, Evelyn stood taller than she had in years, not bitter, not broken, free. And this time, the future had her name on it. The dining room smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary. Evelyn moved slowly, but with purpose, placing the final dish, baked chicken with lemon and thyme, at the center of the freshly polished table. The chairs had been rearranged, one added from the porch, another borrowed from Clara's car trunk. Mismatched, a little wobbly in places, but none of it mattered. Clara arrived first, holding a bottle of red in one hand and a container of still-warm peach cobbler in the other. "No corkscrew drama tonight," she said, waving the bottle like a trophy. "I brought a twist top. Classy," Evelyn murmured, smiling. "I know what I am." Next came Mrs. Talbot from next door with a basket of rolls, then Mr. Irwin from 3 blocks over. He'd lost 3 crossword matches to Evelyn last month and had taken it personally. They greeted each other like old war friends, battle-worn but loyal. And then Lily walked in, her cheeks flushed from the cold, arms full of books and a tote bag slung with art supplies. "Sorry I'm late," she said, dropping her things by the door. "You're not late," Evelyn said. "You're exactly when you needed to be." They gathered around the table, 6 in all, passing dishes and unfolding napkins. No tension, no glances that lingered too long. Just food, laughter, and the sound of a house rediscovering its voice. Evelyn watched them between sips of wine, her hands still, her shoulders at ease. After the plates had been filled and second helpings requested, Evelyn reached beside her and picked up a small, unsealed envelope. She handed it to Lily. "What's this?" Lily asked, eyebrows pinched. "Scholarship paperwork," Evelyn said simply. "The trust is formalized. It'll be waiting for you when the time comes." Lily blinked. "You mean college, art school, trade program, travel, whatever you need to build a life that's yours. No one can touch it, not courts, not banks, not family." Lily opened the envelope, her hands shaking slightly as she scanned the document inside. Her eyes brimmed, then spilled. "You didn't have to—" "I wanted to," Evelyn said. "You lived through it too. You deserve to walk out with something that's yours." Lily stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. She wrapped her arms around Evelyn's shoulders and wept into her neck. The room fell into a hush. Not uncomfortable, but reverent. Evelyn held her close. "Your future's untouchable now," she whispered. When Lily sat again, her face blotchy but bright, Clara raised her glass. "To meals without poison," she said. Everyone laughed, and the toast clinked gently across the room. Evelyn took a slow sip, her gaze drifting toward the empty chair across the table. She had set a place for Maggie, out of habit, out of hope, but Maggie had not come. And Evelyn realized, sitting there with joy in her home and laughter in her kitchen, that she felt no ache over it, just space. Space was peace. Not all absences were wounds. Later, after dessert, Clara helped gather dishes. The neighbors chatted in the living room over decaf, and Lily curled up on the couch with a blanket and her sketch pad, doodling a new version of their home, a line drawing with bold colors and open windows. As Evelyn rinsed plates at the sink, Clara nudged her. "You did it," she whispered. "You built a table worth sitting at." Evelyn smiled. "This time no one's getting fed second." Outside, the porch light flickered once, then steadied, like the house itself had finally exhaled, and across the kitchen counter, the empty chair remained. Not a wound, just a reminder. Some people leave, some are let go, and some dinners are better without them. The envelope was pale yellow, cheap prison stationery, folded unevenly, creased at the corners. Clara had picked it up from Evelyn's mailbox that morning, her mouth tightening when she saw the sender's name in shaky cursive, Kyle Stone. Evelyn hadn't opened it right away. She'd made coffee first, let the kettle whistle, poured it into her favorite blue mug, stirred in cream until the swirl calmed. Then, finally, she sat at the table and slid a knife beneath the seal. The paper inside was thin, the ink faint and smudged in places, but the words were loud. "I didn't know how far I'd fallen until I saw the door close behind me. I don't expect anything, not even an answer. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For what I did to you. For what I let happen to Maggie. For what I took from Lily. If you can forgive me, even just once, maybe I can start over." Evelyn read it once, then again. Then she folded it back into its envelope and set it on the windowsill beside the rosemary plant. She didn't shred it, didn't burn it, she just left it untouched. When Lily got home from school, she dropped her backpack in the hallway and wandered into the kitchen, sniffing the air. "Is that chocolate cake?" Evelyn nodded. "Left over from last night, 1 slice each." "Sweet." Lily opened the fridge for milk, then paused. "Hey, was that from him?" Evelyn didn't turn. "Yes." "Are you going to write him back?" "No." A beat. "Will you ever forgive him?" Lily asked gently. Evelyn turned now, met her granddaughter's eyes. "Forgiveness," she said, "isn't the same thing as access." Lily didn't say anything right away, just nodded like she understood more than a teenager should. They sat together at the table, plates in front of them, forks in hand. The cake was rich and soft, the frosting a little too thick, Lily's favorite. Evelyn took a bite, then reached under the table and slid open the small fireproof safe bolted beneath the sideboard. She removed one document, the original deed to the duplex, now notarized under the Harper Trust. She placed it inside, closed the lid, and turned the key. "I don't keep grudges," she said, "but I keep records." Lily smiled, licking frosting from her fork. "That's going to be a quote one day." "Probably," Evelyn said, leaning back, "on my headstone." They laughed, a little too loud, a little too long, but it was real, laughter that didn't have to apologize for existing. The old dining room clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, the last light faded over the roofline of a house that no longer held ghosts, just paint, paper, and a table where no one had to prove they belonged. Evelyn reached across the table and tapped Lily's glass with hers, the milk and coffee clinking like a quiet toast. Lily grinned. "What are we toasting to?" Evelyn thought for a moment, then said, "The end of pretending." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was whole. Later that night, after Lily had gone upstairs and the kitchen had gone still, Evelyn stood by the window again, looking out at the dark yard. The letter from Kyle remained unopened on the sill, the door was locked, the safe was closed, and her house, for the first time in years, felt like home. She turned off the light, walked toward the stairs, and glanced back once at the dining table, plates rinsed, crumbs scattered, 2 empty chairs. She smiled. He shoved my plate away. I fed him Foreclosure instead, and served my granddaughter a future.